Pilots love Liberty Radio version 4.0. Prepare for launch.
OTC is go.
Packet boost is go.
PTC is go.
LPS is go.
Houston flight is go.
Molotov.
STM is go.
Safety comms is go.
STU is go.
LRD is go.
SRO is go.
CDI is go.
Launch director, NTD, our launch team is ready to proceed at this time.
99, proceeded, 3, 2, 1, ignition. Fly away, Houston.
Consequences so severe, so pull your trigger quickly, dear. Our patriots are acting up, let's punish them with fear. Hey, hey!
Hey, it's Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. It's Wednesday, which means it's the day that I answer your questions. And while I did not officially get an AMA question, there is a question that I've been asked several times over the last week, and that is, Darryl, what do you think about the bathroom bill that wound up getting pushed through in North Carolina? And I got asked this question a couple of times while I was in North Carolina recently. And, you know, it's one of those things to where I attempted to read the bill, and it appears to me that the bill really only applies to bathrooms that are run by state agencies or government agencies, so municipal agencies, cities, towns, schools, and the state government, or anything that's, you know, quote unquote, under the control of the legislative, executive, or judicial branch, blah, blah, blah. So basically, it really only applies to government bathrooms. And what it says is that you must, in those areas of, you know, a government-run bathroom. So if you're driving through North Carolina and you've got to stop, and you're on the interstate, and you go to one of the rest areas. Those are operated by the state. So you must go to the bathroom based on what your sex was at birth. So whatever genitals you had at birth, doesn't matter if you still have those genitals or not, but whatever genitals you had at birth, that's the bathroom you have to go to. And on the one hand, you know, it seems to make sense of, if you're a boy, you go to the boys' room. If you're a girl, you go to the girls' room. However, there's a lot of ambiguity here, because you've got people like Buck Angel, who was born a woman. Buck is now a man. Buck looks like a man. If you were to see a picture of Buck Angel, you would not know that Buck Angel was born a woman. However, if Buck Angel is in North Carolina, Buck Angel would have to go to the women's room because, well, two things. Buck still has girly parts down below, and secondarily, Buck Angel was born a woman. If Buck Angel were to walk into a women's room in North Carolina, people would freak out and say, oh, this is one of those perverts that's just pretending to be a woman. No, Buck Angel is not pretending to be a woman. Buck Angel presents himself as a man. Buck Angel would feel comfortable going into the men's room and going potty in the men's room. So what you have is you've got people, mainly, you know, legislators, that are saying we want to force people to go into a bathroom that they don't feel comfortable going in. And they're going to, you know, try saying that it's about, you know, some pervert or something. And do you really want perverts going into the bathroom with your little girl? And I saw something on Facebook earlier today that said, you know, it's interesting that people are all, you know, they're freaking out now about quote unquote perverts going into the bathroom with their daughters. But apparently they're not freaking out about those same perverts going into the bathroom with their sons. So it's one of these sort of hysteria sort of things. And the entire subject is designed to be hysteria to, you know, separate people and cause them to freak out over something. And, well, what is the libertarian position on this? And, well, I'm glad you asked, or rather, I'm glad I asked myself, because the North Carolina Libertarians actually passed a resolution on this, an official party statement, and I will read that. They say, whereas House Bill 2, that's the legislation that says where people go potty in government bathrooms, whereas House Bill 2 unduly intrudes state authority into local decision-making and unreasonably limits the ability of its citizens of North Carolina to govern themselves, and whereas House Bill 2 declares an individual's gender based on their birth certificate, which, if issued in another state where North Carolina law does not reach, potentially impose undue burdens on citizens, entrapping them in a web of conflicting state laws, and whereas the state does not have the authority to give itself the power to determine an individual's gender, as in the case of transgender or hermaphroditic individuals, that is, people that were born with both genitals at birth, or severely disfigured genitals at birth, and then the doctors had to decide, what do we want to turn this into? They also continue here, and whereas House Bill 2 bans citizens from using North Carolina state courts to remedy discrimination, the bill itself purportedly outlaws, thus materially reducing protections for individual rights. So therefore, be it resolved that the Libertarian Party of North Carolina urges the North Carolina General Assembly to cease seizing more power for the state, end the practice of determining gender bureaucratically, and repeal House Bill 2. Approved in convention, April 24th, 2016. So there you have it. That is the libertarian position, that government should not be in the business of determining what sex or gender someone is, because no matter how they go about determining it, it's going to wind up being determined by a bureaucrat, and it's going to be inefficient. Because, again, what happens with the person that was born a man or born a woman and then later has surgery to, change their genitalia to match the sex that they want to be? So I don't know if Caitlyn Jenner ever had the operation, but Caitlyn Jenner was born Bruce, now wants to be Caitlyn, looks like a woman. So you're saying that Caitlyn Jenner has to go to the men's room because Caitlyn Jenner was born with an outie instead of an innie. Yeah, it's rather strange when you think about it that way, right? This is Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
Are you sick of government lackeys who say you didn't build that? Are you tired of elitists who think you need a government permission slip for everything? Everything you do is an A to B conversation, and the government should see their way out of it. Create true free markets by adopting the BIPCOT No Government License. The BIPCOT No Gov license allows use or modification of any product, service, or software except by governments or government agents. Go to BIPCOT.org. That's Bravo, India, Papa, Charlie, Oscar, Tango.org.
Bitcoin Not Bombs is a launching pad for nonprofits and social entrepreneurs into the financial freedom of the Bitcoin economy. Bitcoin Not Bombs offers premium publicity campaigns designed to facilitate an organization's adoption of Bitcoin as a payment system. Bitcoin Not Bombs is fully committed to being the hub of the nonprofit sector of the Bitcoin economy, maximizing the potential cross-promotion of all our clients and commercial partners. To learn more, visit bitcoinnotbombs.com.
Hi, I'm the Rebel Mistress.
And this is Rob Mathias, host of The Rebel Love Show.
And you're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
With Darryl W. Perry.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. And I don't mention this often enough, but Peace, Love, Liberty Radio is available on a number of outlets, including iHeartRadio. iHeartRadio, it's a mobile app. Download it for your smartphone, Google, Android phone, the Apple phone. Basically, any smartphone, you can download the iHeartRadio app and listen to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on your smartphone just using the internet connection. And the service provider that I have, they actually don't count anything that I listen on iHeartRadio, does not count towards my data usage. So that is, at least for me, it's absolutely amazing because I love listening to the app where you can basically build your own sort of radio station of, I really like this artist. And they'll play songs for that artist and then songs that are by artists that are, somehow deemed by formulas and calculations to be similar to that artist. And I love it. And there's also some podcasts on there. iHeartRadio, you can find the show. I believe it's iHeart.fppradio.com takes you to the link. And I also recently got added to the Google Play Music thing where Google Play has had their music app for a while. They just started adding podcast and Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Actually, all of the podcasts of FPP Radio are part of that Google Play Music, and I believe the link for that is play.fppradio.com, and that'll take you to the thing. You then have to download the app or sign in to the thing, but that'll take you all of the podcast of FPP Radio. So that's Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, which is this show. That also includes the FPP Radio News, the daily newscast, and the weekly FPP Freedom Minute. And I hope you wrote that down. And when I say wrote that down, I meant, with pen and paper because, research shows that might actually help you remember things better. The story comes from NPR. And yes, this is launching into version 4.0 of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. The story, again, from NPR, they say, as laptops become smaller and more ubiquitous, and with the advent of tablets, the idea of taking notes by hand just seems old-fashioned to many students today. Typing your notes is faster, which comes in handy when there's a lot of information to take down, but it turns out there are still advantages to doing things the old-fashioned way. For one thing, research shows that laptops and tablets have a tendency to be distracting. It's easy to click over for Facebook for that dull lecture, or rather during that dull lecture. And a study has shown that the fact that you have to be slower when you take notes by hand is what makes it more useful in the long run. And let me pause right here because I actually heard a podcast a couple days ago. I believe it was an episode of Sex and Science Hour with Doctors Brian Sovereign and Stephanie Murphy, and they were talking about this. And one thing that they mentioned, and it totally would not have necessarily come across my mind. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't, but I heard the podcast, and they mentioned it, so I retained the information. And no, I did not write it down, but I retained the information nonetheless. One thing that they mentioned on this of when you take notes by hand, because unless you know shorthand, you're not going to be getting every word that's said. And because you're not going to be getting every word that's said, you're going to be taking the highlights. So you'll write down the highlights, the important parts. And that is going to help you wind up remembering things because you're remembering the highlights. You're taking notes of the highlights. Because if you have this, like here's verbatim a lecture, chances are you're not going to go back and reread the entire amount of notes that you took. Whereas if you write it down by hand and you know you're only getting the highlights, you can then look at a single page and that'll be all the highlights of the lecture, and then it sparks something. Oh, yes, I remember this. I remember this. I remember he said this and then went on to this other thing that I didn't write down, but blah, blah, blah. So it sort of helps trigger the mind because you're reading the, sort of bullet points, if you will. The article here continues. In a study published in Psychological Science, Pam Miller of Princeton University and Daniel Oppenheimer of the University of California, Los Angeles, sought to test how note-taking by hand or by computer affects learning. Miller tells NPR's Rachel Martin, quote, when people type their notes, they have this tendency to try to take verbatim notes and write down as much of the lecture as they can. Those students who were taking longhand notes in our studies were forced to be more selective because you can't write as fast as you can type, and that extra processing of the material that they were doing benefited them. Miller and Oppenheimer cited that note-taking can be categorized two ways: generative and non-generative. Generative note-taking pertains to summarizing, paraphrasing, concept mapping, while non-generative note-taking involves copying something verbatim, i.e., taking dictation. And there are two hypotheses on why note-taking is beneficial in the first place. The first idea is called the encoding hypothesis, which says that when a person is taking notes, the processing that occurs will improve learning and retention. The second, called the external storage hypothesis, is that you can learn by being able to look back at your notes or even the notes of other people. Because people can type faster than they write, using a laptop will make people more likely to try to transcribe everything they're hearing. So on the one hand, Miller and Oppenheimer were faced with the question of whether the benefit of being able to look at your complete transcribed notes on a laptop outweighs the drawbacks of not processing the information. On the other hand, when writing longhand, you process the information better, but have less to look back at. For the first study, they took university students, the standard guinea pig of psychology, and showed them TED Talks about various topics. Afterwards, they found that the students who used laptops typed significantly more words than those who took notes by hand. When testing how well the students remembered information, the researchers found a key point of divergence in the type of question. For questions that asked students to simply remember facts, like dates, both groups did equally well. But for conceptual application questions, such as how do Japan and Sweden differ in their approach to equality within their societies, well, I'll tell you about it in just a moment here on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
Are you sick of government lackeys who say you didn't build that? Are you tired of elitists who think you need a government permission slip for everything? Everything you do is an A to B conversation, and the government should see their way out of it. Create true free markets by adopting the BIPCOT No Government License. The BIPCOT No Gov license allows use or modification of any product, service, or software except by governments or government agents. Go to BIPCOT.org. That's Bravo, India, Papa, Charlie, Oscar, Tango.org.
Bitcoin Not Bombs is a launching pad for nonprofits and social entrepreneurs into the financial freedom of the Bitcoin economy. Bitcoin Not Bombs offers premium publicity campaigns designed to facilitate an organization's adoption of Bitcoin as a payment system. Bitcoin Not Bombs is fully committed to being the hub of the nonprofit sector of the Bitcoin economy, maximizing the potential cross-promotion of all our clients and commercial partners. To learn more, visit bitcoinnotbombs.com.
Hi, I'm the Rebel Mistress.
And this is Rob Mathias, host of The Rebel Love Show.
And you're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
With Darryl W. Perry.
So go ahead and write this down. Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. For nearly 40 years, Roberts & Roberts Brokerage has been a trusted source for buying and selling precious metals like gold and silver. They take Bitcoin for precious metal purchases and have permanently removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid in the digital currency. Call Roberts & Roberts Brokerage today for knowledgeable advice on buying and selling precious metals and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 800-874-9760 or visit them online at rrbi.co. That's rrbi.co. So, based on the study where they asked students about conceptual application questions, such as how do Japan and Sweden differ in their approaches to equality within their societies, the laptop users, quote, did significantly worse. The same thing happened in the second study, even when they specifically told students using laptops to try to avoid writing things down verbatim. Miller says even when we told people they should not be taking these notes verbatim, they were not able to overcome their instinct. The more words the students copied verbatim, the worse they performed on recall test. And to test external storage hypothesis for the third study, they gave students the opportunity to review their notes in between the lecture and the test. The thinking is, if students have time to study their notes from their laptops, the fact that they typed more extensive notes than their longhand writing peers could possibly help them perform better. But the students taking notes by hand still performed better. The duo of Miller and Oppenheimer said, "This is suggestive evidence that longhand notes may have superior external storage as well as superior encoding functions." Do studies like these mean wise college students will start migrating back to notebooks? Miller says, "I think it's hard to sell, or rather it's a hard sell to get people to go back to pen and paper. But they are developing lots of technologies now like LiveScribe and various stylus and tablet technologies that are getting better and better. And I think that will be sort of an easier sell to college students and people of that generation." So there you have it. If you need to take notes, do so by hand because, well, that will actually help you remember things. And again, it's probably because you're taking down the highlights of what is happening and you're actually processing things instead of just sitting there and like some sort of drone and just transcribing things. It's being said and you're typing type, typity, type. And you're not retaining anything because you're typing. And, well, it's saved in the document. Why do I need to retain the information? It's saved in the document. And then you go back through and you start reading the document and you're like, wait a second, something doesn't make sense here. What am I trying to read? And, that's because you misspelled a word or you put the wrong word. You thought it was one thing, you put something else. And, well, now it makes absolutely no sense. So, yes, I would say if you are in a situation where you need to take notes, do it longhand because it will wind up benefiting you in the long run. So let me jump thoughts here. And I've been wanting for a while to talk about relationships. And I'll probably go a little bit more in-depth on Friday about relationships. And, well, as sort of a segue to prepare you for Friday, I've got an article here titled 4 Words That Will Ruin a Relationship. The article comes from lifehack.org. Even the most successful couples can fail at communication when emotions run high. In the heat of battle, words can be spoken before brains are put into gear. Hurt, resentment, or anger can make the best of us lash out. As the saying goes, when emotion goes up, intelligence goes down. When your partner says something that you feel is unjustified or unfair, it's super easy to react and spit out something you don't really mean. Understanding the cause of this reactive behavior will help you stop doing it and to understand and deal with it better when it's thrown at you. Words are powerful, more powerful than people realize. They create our reality and that of others around us, and choosing them carefully will be your greatest friend. When someone throws out a thoughtless comment, the receiving person can easily feel attacked or misunderstood. They feel like they're being judged and tried without a jury, and they go into a defensive reaction. And allow me to pause here to say there have been studies that show that mental anguish or mental pain, if you will, causes a response in the body the same way physical pain does. So when people say, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me, that actually is denying reality. Because the reality is that, yes, words can be painful. Actions that do not, so if somebody is standing 3 feet away from you and they're doing this, remember the childish thing that we all did in the back seat of the car? I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. And you wave your hand about 2 inches from somebody's face. I'm not touching you. Mom, he's not touching me. Darryl, stop not touching your brother. Yeah, that whole thing, that causes a response in the brain. It can be like you're actually being punched to some degree. Now, I'll tell you the 4 words that will ruin any relationship when we come back here on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
When her plush and comfy life suddenly and unexpectedly fell apart, Brooke and her dog Cloud set out to defy the odds. If this is a man's world, as they say, living on the streets is no place for a young woman. One day she awoke in the redwood forest and realized she had become a hobo, and would ultimately come to know exactly what it means to survive. How to Be a Hobo by Brooke Willett is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. In 2115 New England, there are no borders, no states, and no regulations, yet never has a more peaceful and prosperous place existed. But Mr. Drake's security company has seen better days. Faced with the prospect of waning power, Mr. Drake intends to replace the anarchy of New England with a government. But at what cost? Will anybody care? And can anyone stop him? Anarchy in New England by Joe Jarvis is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry, online at fppradio.com.
Before I tell you the 4 words that will ruin any relationship, I want to make sure that I can tell you about something that will actually wind up improving your life. Possibly. It'll at least, bring you a little bit more joy, and more joy is a good thing, right? Well, if you're fed up with the government running every aspect of your life, you need to be listening to the Lava Flow podcast. Go right now to thelavaflow.com/listen. The Lava Flow podcast, channeling the flow of information to the libertarian, anarcho-capitalist, voluntarist, and agorist community. Subscribe today using any podcatcher at thelavaflow.com/listen. Or just go back to sucking up to the government. The Lava Flow podcast, striking the root every episode. So let me run through these words really fast. The words that will ruin any relationship. Should. When you say you should or you should not, what is coming across to the other person is that you think you are superior or an authority and that you know better than they do. Try instead to say, I would really like if you could. You. The second you start talking about what you are feeling in sentences that start with you, you're probably going to be in trouble. You might say, you never listen to me, only wishing to impart that you feel unheard, but what the other person hears is, it's all your fault. The word you comes with an imaginary jabbing finger. It's accusatory. And if the receiving person is feeling vulnerable, defensive, or emotional, whatever you say after you will be interpreted as an accusation. Instead, try saying, I feel, blah, 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 or when this happens, I feel, blah, blah, blah. That way, you're still getting across what you want to relay. You're just not doing it in an accusatory fashion. Must. Word number 3, similar to should, must sets the speaker as an expert. Instead, say, I'd love you too, or it would really help if you could. Expect. As someone once said, peace begins where expectation ends. Everyone has a blueprint in their head, an idea, or a mold of how things should be and how others should behave. Come to grips with the concept that other people don't have to follow your rules and that they may not have the same expectations as you. There's a little bit more here, and as always, it will be in the show notes. And don't forget, every Wednesday I answer your questions. Send those over ama@fppradio.com.
The podcasts of FPP Radio are licensed under Copyright. We believe that copying is a form of flattery and do not abide by the copyright laws. Those laws serve to restrict the flow of ideas, which no one can really own. Copying is an act of love. Love is not subject to law. If you enjoy the show, consider joining the Fans program and get perks like ad-free versions of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio and FPP Radio News. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com.